All right, let's begin. So I'm going to talk about something that I consider myself to be simultaneously a great expert on and also not an expert at all. So anxiety. This is something that I have experienced from time to time in my life, but only for like one. I mean, it's hard to say if when I was a kid, what I was experiencing was anxiety. I was a mess back then, but as a teenager, I experienced a decent bout of anxiety, but then for most of my life, not. So that's the reason that I'm an expert in it, is because I'm an expert in not being anxious, but less so in dealing with anxiety. Because when I had it, I didn't know what I was doing, and I had it. So I'm going to talk about a couple of ideas here, and some of them might be something that you've heard of before. Some of them might be something that you think I should try that. I'm going to throw kind of a lot of ideas out there. They're going to share a lot of the same principles, and it's kind of like that. Like in Tai Chi, when you're learning a posture and you're like, there are 1,000 different details to learn. And if you're trying to focus on individual details, it can be pretty rough. But if you can see kind of the overarching picture and connect these things, then it's going to be less overwhelming. That said, not to make fun of anxiety or make light of this, but some people will probably hear a lot of stuff being thrown at them and just use that as an excuse to be more anxious. Like, I'm never going to be able to get this. So try not to let that happen. I have had a couple of people over the years, as a martial arts teacher, a Tai Chi teacher, a meditation teacher, express this concern or difficulty with meditation, specifically with regards to anxiety, where people say, and I have experienced this to some degree, where it's like, I'm feeling anxious, I sit to meditate, and all I do is stew in my own anxiety, and it makes it worse because I'm just thinking more and more of the anxious thoughts. And instead of those thoughts disappearing, I feel like it's worse. And I certainly believe that that's possible. I have had that experience before. I think that what is also very likely to be happening is, as you sit and meditate, you're starting to be aware of thoughts that were more kind of running in the background and always there. And so if you are like some people I know, your anxious thoughts are very kind of front facing, and you're forthright with them, and you like to talk it out and be visibly anxious sometimes. This is my brother for many years. I like to say, until he started practicing with me and meditating, I'm sure that moving to California and also using some other methods probably had at least as much to do with it. But many people in my life are kind of like that. It's like, when they're anxious, you can read it on their whole body and the way they talk and all of that stuff. And then there are people like me where most of the time, if I'm feeling stress or anxiety, it's not very front facing at all. It's just like hiding and shows up as like stomach issues. So for years I had pretty bad acid reflux, and that was definitely a stress induced thing, because when I did start meditating, it disappeared. I'm going to say that no matter what version of anxiety you have, meditation will help in some way, but this is more going to be useful for the hidden stress and the hidden anxiety, where you're going to start to just recognize these thoughts and these cycles of thoughts. And meditation will, even if in the moment it doesn't make those thoughts disappear, it will certainly help you to become aware of them. And that's part of the issue that some people say is, I'm so aware of it. But that's an important first step. If you're not aware, then it's just going to keep running in the background. It's going to keep kind of eating away at your body. Like literally, you're going to end up with ulcers and stuff. So you got to be aware of the thoughts. Then you will be able to deal with them by taking action or letting go of the thoughts themselves. But awareness is one of the most important things that meditation gives us. Self-awareness, awareness of our external environment, but more importantly, and I would say more so, awareness of our internal environment. So while I completely get this idea of I want to be super careful meditating because I don't want to increase my anxiety by being aware of those thoughts, that should be the first step, is in your meditation at least, is becoming aware of thoughts. And that happens for many people, whether they're experiencing anxiety or not, where they start to meditate and they feel like, oh, I'm getting calm, this is nice. I remember my first meditation 25 years ago. It was like a really nice meditation for 5 minutes. And then I ended up just like curled up in a heap against the wall because I couldn't just sit comfortably. But after the next couple of months, I started to feel like my meditation was getting worse because I was starting to become more and more aware of those thoughts. And so very common experience. People think I'm getting worse because I'm recognizing more of the thoughts. It's not a bad thing. This is a good thing. And having that kind of mindset is something I'll come back to with some of these tools. So in any case, if you have in the past or you're trying for the first time to sit and meditate and you're doing it in kind of an anxious state and you feel like your first experience is a negative one and you feel like you're just having more thoughts, you want to try to push beyond that rather than immediately giving up on meditation. So I'm going to talk about, I read this interesting article today. I forget what, it was a website, showed up in my news feed. This is by Charles Browning, PhD. The article was entitled, "Anxiety Attacks No More." So some of these things are very similar to ideas I've heard of and talked about in the past. Some of them are kind of clear variations, but we'll talk about each one. These are 5 steps, and I'll give kind of my thoughts on them. So the first step that he gives is identify and focus on your strengths and resources. When anxiety arises, tap into your inner strengths and coping resources. Take slow, deep breaths. Reflect on past experiences where you successfully handled challenging situations. Recognizing your strengths can shift your focus from feeling overwhelmed to feeling empowered. So this is, years ago, I started talking about this idea called the second thought. And this is incredibly powerful when dealing with so many different issues where we're kind of stuck, where we have this cyclical kind of thought process that we're having a difficult time of breaking free of that habit, is to try to inject or interject a second thought. The first thought being, some kind of anxiety thought, stress about this test coming up. And you want your second thought, instead of just being what naturally follows from the first, let's say that you got a Kung Fu test coming up and you're like, I'm worried about this test. I'm going to fail. I'm going to look like an idiot. I'm going to get hurt, and all the things that kind of flow from that. Instead, you want your second thoughts to be kind of a break from that. And that break can simply be something that sounds like, but wait, is that really true? The more we can ask ourselves that question and kind of interrupt our thought process, especially in a kind of a negative thought process, the better off we'll be. So if you get that second thought to be kind of a questioning thought, then you can go from there in the direction that you want to go. And meditation is key with this, to kind of create that clearing, but also to help you recognize the thought early on, rather than what we normally do, which is like, I've been in this anxiety state for the last half hour and I'm just realizing that this is what I've been doing. The earlier we can recognize it, the better. It's like there's a boulder about to roll down a hill and you want to be able to have your hand on the boulder before it starts rolling. That's the easiest time to stop it. So Dr. Browning gives these different things that he calls thought shifter declaration. This is kind of like when I interrupt it and then I decide, oh, I don't want to be having this kind of cycle of thought anymore. This is basically like a a declaration. It's like a positive reinforcement kind of thing where you're going to shift your thought in a different direction. So the one he gives for this is, I have faced challenges before and I have the inner strength and resources to handle this situation just like I did before. I can do it now. And this is something like I really hope that you get out of some of the more difficult experiences in class in the dojo, where you find yourself out in the rest of the world and you realize that whatever that is, it's not that bad. I've been through something worse. So if you've been in a really hard test, for example, a really hard class, then you can point to that and say, if I was able to stick through that, then I can stick through this. Another step, what we call step 2, redefine anxiety as a signal for intentional change. So view anxiety as a signal for growth rather than a loss of control. Explore the underlying message it conveys and identify areas in your life that need attention or adjustment. Reframing anxiety as an opportunity for self-reflection and positive change redirects its energy. This is huge. Again, it kind of relies on this interruption in the process where you have that second thought. But if you're able to use this, kind of like the same way that I talk about pain, like in a really hard class, pain is drawing your attention to something. Anxiety is, mental pain. This is drawing our attention to something. And this is, on its face, a good thing, that it's drawing our attention to something that needs our attention. And if you think of anxiety in that way, then it still has power, but its power is useful for us rather than having kind of power over us. We have power using it as a tool. So we say, great, this anxiety is telling me that here's a thing that needs my attention, and now I'm going to go work on doing something about it. And maybe in this case, it is an action that I need to take. I'm anxious about this long plane ride that I have. I'm booking my trip later on this year to go to Hong Kong. I've never been before. It's going to be a long plane ride. I don't actually hate being on the plane. I hate getting on the plane. I hate everything having to do with getting to the airport on time. And there's one place that I'm on time all the time. It's the dojo. Everything else I'm late for. But all of that is really like the thing to prepare for me. I know some people love to get to the airport early and have a drink before the flight. That helps them with anxiety. I prefer to meditate or do something that helps calm me. Other people who deal with anxiety a lot like to plan and plan and plan. This is my wife, my partner, Grace, who I'm going to Hong Kong with to meet her family, her extended family, for the first time. She loves to plan. We've been planning this trip for like a year already. And that is another way to deal with it. In any case, there is like something that needs your attention. And whatever the way that you can deal with that is, whether it's by taking an action, planning for something, or just saying like, this is bringing my attention to the fact that I have lots of thoughts that I need to let go of, then that's just another way of empowering yourself with anxiety. So just flip that mindset and think, this is pointing me in a direction of something that needs my attention. The thought shifter declaration. This anxiety is a signal for growth, and I embrace the opportunity to reflect, adjust, and make positive changes in my life. It's time. I've put this off long enough. So this is like, it's kind of like an affirmation, but with a little bit of a tweak on it. So the idea is you say this thing and then you go to deal with it. The third step is set small, achievable goals. And if you've ever heard me talk about goals, you've heard me talk about this idea. It's hugely important. When anxiety strikes, break down challenges into small, achievable goals. Focus on one specific action you can take in the present moment. By concentrating on realistic goals, you shift attention away from overwhelming thoughts and create a sense of progress and control. So at the beginning of every year, I talk a lot about setting goals and achieving them. And one of the most important things is bite-sized chunks. There's a great story that I heard. It was somebody who was, I want to say, stuck on Everest, may have been a different mountain. It was some big, scary, very cold mountain. And they got separated from their group. And I think they actually fell into a crevasse. That's how you say that word if you're fancy. And broke a leg. something broke, I think a leg, because they ended up having to crawl their way out. And I'll be honest, anytime I am in a situation where I'm cold, I immediately start thinking about how I'm going to die. I've never had a broken leg sitting at the bottom of a crevasse, having to get myself back to base camp. I cannot even imagine how terrible that must feel. Yet this person survives. I want to say they made a movie about it. And the way that he described doing it was not by getting overwhelmed by the impossible task before him of making it all the way back to base camp, because that seemed impossible. It was so big of an undertaking that it was like, I just give up. But instead, he shifted his focus to a small distance that he could see in front of him. And he's like, I'm going to crawl to that rock there. And then that was his first goal. He made it. And then he looks a little bit further down. I'm going to crawl to that tree there. I don't know if there are trees on the mountain, but in just one little bit at a time, and eventually made it there. I'm sure had frostbite and they had to, take care of stuff, but survived incredibly. If a human being is capable of that, I think most of us are capable of meeting these big undertakings just by turning them into small bite-sized chunks. So it's a very helpful tool in being able to break things down from overwhelming to reasonable. The thought shifter declaration: right here, right now, I will set small goals that will make my life better and happier. I'll take one small step at a time, celebrating each achievement along the way, one moment, one thought at a time. And that's it. I mean, our practice on some level is really about breaking down this impossible, overwhelming thing called life into small bite-sized chunks, into little moments, right? If we get stuck in, thinking about all the stuff that we have to do in the future, that can for sure get overwhelming and definitely will bring on anxiety. But if we are thinking of it in terms of, what do I have to do today? Or what do I have to do now? What is the thing that I'm doing in this present moment? Most of the time, guess what? All you got to do now is take a breath. And anytime you focus on your breath, that will definitely help to calm you down. And literally, that's all you have to do to survive is breathe. Easy. The next one: replace anxiety with a new mindset. Use solution-focused therapy techniques to replace anxious thoughts with resilience and confidence. Ask yourself empowering questions like, if my anxiety vanished suddenly, what would be the first sign it was over? Or if this anxiety holds a message about an area of my life needing change, what would it say? Or if anxiety took a physical form, how would I confidently interact with it? In my anxiety prevention toolbox, there's one unusual and powerful tool I will use to eliminate stress, and that tool is ... So this is great, this shifting. So a new mindset, replacing anxious thoughts with resilience and confidence. It's kind of like when we talk about, you recognize yourself having a negative thought and you immediately have 3 positive thoughts. On some level, our brain is a machine and we are machines, and we have been programmed up till now by our experiences in life and of course our genetics and all that stuff. But we are kind of a process of what has happened thus far. And our future and our future self and our future thoughts do not have to equal what we've had so far. We can choose to reprogram. We can choose to practice the same way that we practice punches and kicks and the form in Tai Chi and everything else that we do. We can choose to practice thoughts. And by having that little interruption and then choosing a different thought, we practice having that. It makes it more likely to come up again in the future. Step 5, replace negative thinking with gratitude. So practice deliberate gratitude. And oh wait, I didn't give this thought shifter for the last one. Sorry. Right now, I will ask myself empowering questions to shift my focus from problems to solutions, decreasing my anxiety. That touches on a really great thing I talk about all the time, where we want to see problems or challenges as something that is like a fun thing that is challenging us, rather than a thing that we have to overcome. It's like we shift it into what is possible. So like, what are all the possible ways of dealing with this? Okay, so replace negative attitude, negative thinking with gratitude. Practice deliberate gratitude and foster a positive outlook on life. Reflect on and appreciate the positive blessings in life, no matter how small. Challenge negative thinking patterns by consciously focusing on positive aspects. This mindset reset can reduce anxiety's grip on your mind. So kind of like what I was talking about before, just practicing gratitude. This is a pretty common kind of meditation that we do pretty rarely, but you're literally just spending time thinking about that which you are grateful for. And that, in the moment, of course, shifts your mindset, but you'll notice that it increasingly becomes just a natural way of thinking. Your mind will kind of go into that mindset more freely and more naturally. So the thought shifter declaration is, I have so much to be thankful for, things like ... And every single day I choose to focus on these blessings. I will cultivate an attitude of gratitude, reducing anxiety's grip on my mind. Great. So I mentioned in the beginning, and I'm sure that you guys don't want me to finish this talk without talking about the time in my life when I can remember having the most anxiety. So this was when I was in high school. I got my first girlfriend, and I spent the entire relationship worrying that she was going to dump me. And I was like so desperate for love that I literally would spend hours throughout the day thinking about this, thinking about how, like, I would play the scenario over and over in my mind about the things that she would say and how much it was going to hurt my feelings and all this stuff. Meanwhile, there was no sign of this happening. It's really something, and now it did eventually happen, and I think I probably willed myself into it. Like, if you know, if you're in a relationship and you spend the entire time worried about how it's going to end, it's going to end at some point. And honestly, did not learn how to deal with it until years later. But I will say that one of the things that helped me to kind of get over that in the long run was this idea of taking these anxious thoughts and anxiety to the absolute biggest, most ridiculous conclusion. And this is a pretty common tool that some people use for anxiety too. And for some people, it doesn't work, but it works for me, where I notice myself starting to worry about this thing. And so I think about, like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And then I'm like, but that's not that bad. What's even worse than that? So what's the worst? And it always goes to the universe ends. That's the furthest way I can take it. I'm very creative at getting there. And it ends up always with me just laughing at the, you know, first of all, the smallness, but also just the ridiculousness of this cycle of thought. Because anxiety on some level is something that if we can laugh at, it will probably disappear or at least become minimized. And that's not to say that you should laugh at other people's anxiety. I've tried that in the past. It doesn't work, especially in a relationship. So you want to be able to laugh at yourself. If you can look in the mirror and laugh at yourself every single day, that's great. And especially try to laugh at anxiety. And one of the ways to do it is just take it to the most ridiculous conclusions. You're like, how do I get from here to the sun engulfs the earth, the universe winks out of existence, and none of us exist anymore? And so you're like, well, first, you know, the relationship is going to end, of course, and then I'm going to, you know, take out my angst by becoming a physicist, and I'm going to invent a doomsday device and explode the entire universe. So there are probably usually a lot of steps in between there. But when you get to the end, you realize that first, the thing that I'm dealing with right now isn't so bad, but also just the whole idea of being anxious about all the possible things that can happen. And look, there are so many terrible things that can happen, and there's so many terrible things that are already happening. So try to use that as kind of a little bit of a mental shift. I'm running out of time. As much as you'd love to hear me keep ranting about anxiety, I'm going to move on to a final thing that I hope leaves us in more of a Zen state. So this is a reading from Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, a wonderful book. If you haven't read it yet, Shunryu Suzuki really has a great way of putting things into perspective. And this is an idea that I think I probably first heard reading this book the first time many years ago. But this is another great way of dealing with anxiety by taking it to its final conclusion. So he says, I went to Yosemite National Park and I saw some huge waterfalls. The highest one there is 1,340 feet high. And from where the water comes down like a curtain thrown down from the top of the mountain, it does not seem to come down swiftly as you might expect. It seems to come down very slowly because of the distance. And the water does not come down as one stream, but is separated into many tiny streams. From a distance, it looks like a curtain. And I thought it must be a very difficult experience for each drop of water to come down from the top of such a high mountain. It takes time, a long time for the water to finally reach the bottom of the waterfall. And it seems to me that our human life may be like this. We have many difficult experiences in our life, but at the same time, I thought the water was not originally separated, but was one whole river. Only when it is separated does it have some difficulty in falling. It is as if the water does not have any feeling when it is one whole river. Only when separated into many drops can it begin to have or to express some feeling. When we see one whole river, we do not feel the living activity of the water, but when we dip part of the water into a dipper, we experience some feeling of the water. Feeling ourselves in the water in this way, we cannot use it just in a material way. It is a living thing. So you think about each individual drop like a human life. It's like when it becomes separate, it's kind of bouncing around, it's getting knocked around in the air. It's got a very stressful kind of tenuous existence. It isn't until it dives back in and becomes one with the river again that it can feel kind of relaxed and calm. So before we were born, we had no feeling. We were once with the universe. This is called mind only, or essence of mind, or big mind. After we are separated by birth from this oneness, as the water falling from the waterfall is separated by the wind and rocks, then we have feeling. You have difficulty because you have feeling. You attach to the feeling you have without knowing just how this kind of feeling is created. When you do not realize that you are one with the river or one with the universe, you have fear. Whether it is separated into drops or not, water is water. Our life and death are the same thing. When we realize this fact, we have no fear of death anymore. We have no actual difficulty in our life. So this kind of puts things into perspective. If you're thinking in terms of life and death, this thing that you're dealing with right now, this thing that you're anxious about, can feel like a life or death thing. And this is a thing that human beings are really great at. We're great at blowing things way out of proportion and feeling like everything is actually like a life or death kind of existential crisis. But that's not actually true. And even death, which is the ultimate kind of conclusion of all of our anxieties and happiness and everything that happens, it's going to come for us all. Even that does not need to be a stressful thing for us to worry about. If we have this understanding of death, like I know some of us believe in an afterlife, or some of us believe that we're just kind of getting absorbed back into a universal consciousness, even if all you believe that's going to happen is you go in the dirt and you don't have to deal with the nonsense that you're dealing with now, all of that should be a relief. The only reason that death should feel anxious for you is if, bless you, is if you're planning on going to hell. And then yes, I get why that would be anxiety inducing. But let's say that you are just kind of becoming one with the whole again. This is an end to our anxiety. And so in this way, meditation is kind of like practice dying. And we are practicing just letting go of the ego and the individual anxieties and all of that stuff that, of course, makes life interesting, but also makes life very stressful. And just being in the present with the breath and feeling it one with everything. This is what we are able to feel and experience in meditation, at least after a decent meditation. If you don't feel that tonight, try not to use that as an opportunity to be anxious about your bad meditation. Just let it go back to the breath and feel. Each breath as it comes in has kind of its own life, and then as it goes back out, it's just rejoining the universe. So your consciousness can feel the same. You invite each breath in, and then when you let it out, you're just rejoining, becoming one with everything. Sit comfortable. So we'll do a quick review of posture. Whether you're sitting, kneeling seiza, cross-legged, you want your knees even with or below your hips rather than sticking up. That way your legs will not fall asleep. Your spine is straight. So we don't want to be hunched and we don't want to be leaning. Good straight spine, including your shoulders back and your chin parallel to the ground. Hands are upturned here, here. You don't want to be sliding down because that creates a bad posture and you're slouching. And from here, your eyes are closed. Upturned to the point between your eyebrows, not crossing the eyes, just a gentle raising of your gaze. From here, relax and watch the breath. Let go of all thoughts, worries, and cares. Be here now. Mind wanders, bring it gently back to the breath.